Welcome back to the channel. Today's video is about how to navigate conflict in relationships. I'm Casey Lepper. I'm a licensed psychotherapist working with individuals and couples, as well as a spiritual guide and teacher. So today's video I think is really important because most of us want a really healthy relationship. And when we think of a healthy relationship, we think that means that we don't have conflict. But really, it's not about having zero conflict in a relationship. That being able to say that you and your partner never fight or argue isn't really a stamp of accomplishment. That can actually mean that you're avoiding certain conversations that need to be had. Instead, the mark of a really satisfying and healthy relationship is your ability to have constructive, beneficial, and productive conflict. It's where you have necessary skills that you can adequately share what it is that you want to be able to communicate without getting volatile, disruptive, or cruel to your partner. So today's video, I'm outlining the 4 top strategies to be able to handle conflict in a relationship. So with the 4 tips that I'm outlining, you might notice that you're really good at one of them, but you might be weaker in the other. And so just keep note of which ones show up most for you, which ones are weaknesses, and which one you might be stronger at. So the first tip to help you navigate conflict in a relationship is to understand your pattern in conflict. In other words, how do you respond to a perceived blame, attack, or criticism from your partner? There's a really famous couples researcher named Dr. John Gottman, and he's spent 5 decades studying what makes relationships work and what make them don't work. And one of the things he's put forth is the idea of the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. Now, what that is it's describing your reactive styles when you are in a tense, argumentative conversation. And so those styles are either you respond with defensiveness, criticism, stonewalling, or contempt. And each of us lean to maybe 1 or 2 of those. And maybe if the fight goes on long enough, you might bring up, all 4 of them can appear. It's really important to be able to understand which ones you lean to. So for instance, defensiveness is when a partner comes and they try to communicate something to you, and your immediate reaction is to defend. And so if you realize this is coming up for you, you might notice that in arguments, you're never really getting to the heart of the issue because you're fighting back immediately. Another one is criticism. So if your partner comes to you with something, you fire back and you criticize something within them. And again, this is pushing off the real root of the matter. So you're never able to really have a deep understanding about what it is that your partner was trying to convey. And therefore you get in these circular arguments where you're fighting back and forth and you're just blaming instead of taking any responsibility. The other one is stonewalling. This is where we shut down. And usually a person who stonewalls tends to get really physiologically aroused. So their heart rate increases really quickly. They start getting sweaty. They get that nervous system dysregulation. And so a person who stonewalls, they just kind of shut down. And so they withdraw. Maybe they have flat eye affect, their face falls, or they could physically distance themselves. They're more likely to leave the house when an argument is happening because they're too physiologically aroused and they don't really trust themselves in that situation. They're kind of frozen. And so the best way for them to retreat is to withdraw completely. And stonewalling actually happens most often with men. The statistics show that 80% of the time, men are likely to lead with stonewalling versus all the others. And the final one, and maybe the most dangerous, is contempt. So contempt can look like trying to put your partner down, trying to push them down, and it has this energy of disgust. But it can also look like sarcasm or mockery. So if you use a particular voice to make fun of what your partner is saying, or you're pushing back and trying to push them down, then that shows contempt is in the conversation. And contempt, if it's appearing, is probably the strongest predictor of divorce and unsatisfying relationships. So especially if you see contempt in your relationship, it's really a good idea to try to figure out what needs to be healed, cleaned up, or reconfigured so contempt's not coming up. defensiveness, the criticism, and the stonewalling, there are specific antidotes that you can use that can be really helpful to just remember and practice when you're outside of the fight. So you're more likely to use it when you're in a fight. For defensiveness, it's best to just take responsibility. A lot of times people say they want to justify, but it's coming off as defensiveness. And it's okay if you want to justify your position. If I want to explain why I didn't do the dishes, but that's just going to seem like defensiveness to him. And so the best practice is to take a step back and say, okay, I really haven't been cleaning the dishes much. Or you take a step back and you try to take as much responsibility as you can. Remember, so much of the arguments are perspective. And so it's not about winning, it's about seeking understanding. So couples who want to win an argument tend to get into these 4 horsemen of the apocalypse much easier. And that's when you get into the circular loop arguments and end up creating negative patterns of reaction. And you end up not being able to trust that you can really convey what you're thinking or feeling or what you want to express because you're going to be met with one of those 4. So those are the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. Again, they're defensiveness, criticism, stonewalling, and contempt. And first, you want to be really aware of your pattern. And so my pattern previously had always been defensiveness. And it was coming from this desire to help my partner understand where it's coming from and to justify or rationalize. But he always took that as me being defensive. And so one of the antidotes to that is just being able to take self-responsibility. And each of these 4 horsemen have a specific antidote. And so those antidotes are, for defensiveness, you want to take self-responsibility. For criticism, you want to have more curiosity and take a step back and try to understand. For stonewalling, you want to self-soothe and take a break. And for contempt, you probably want to do some level of coaching or counseling or mentorship work where you're trying to learn why is it that you're bringing in that very negative energy into the relationship. Because like I said, it is the biggest predictor of divorce. And it's really hard to feel vulnerable and trusting of your partner when contempt is coming out. So that's the one that you really want to make sure to work on. My second tip revolves around self-soothing. So self-soothing is the antidote to stonewalling. But self-soothing is an important skill in all conflicts. If our nervous system is really dysregulated, we're going to take in more fear-based information. And so especially when we're trying to understand where our partner is coming from or try to find a resolution, we have to notice when our heart rate is too high. And if so, and if we've been arguing for more than 15 minutes, it's unlikely anything productive is going to come from that conversation. So I heard some statistics once that I can't really back them up because I cannot find the specific research, but it was something around if you've been arguing for 15 minutes or more, then each person is losing a point of IQ per minute after that. And what happens is when we're talking to someone, we're using our whole brain, ideally our whole brain, our left hemisphere, right hemisphere, our prefrontal cortex, and our limbic brain. But if we've been in kind of a battle with someone and we're getting heightened, our limbic brain, our lizard brain is going to take over. And our limbic brain controls our emotions and our aggression. So it's the mammalian part. So think about if you're terrorizing a dog for so long, what are they going to do? They might run away, they might fight you, or they might just freeze. And that's exactly what happens to us in conversations. Particularly with someone that we really love or care for, there's a certain level of vulnerability there. And if you're feeling attacked or criticized or blamed with your partner, especially if you're feeling contempt, then it is really going to be really hard to have a really mindful, calm conversation where you're understanding the other person's side. And so being able to self-soothe is really important. For criticism, it's very similar. So if you feel like you're being attacked, again, you just have to step back and seek to understand. So ask more open-ended questions. Don't push back blame. Just seek to understand what your partner is trying to tell you. If you find yourself arguing for a long time and you notice your heart rate's high, you're sweating, your field of vision is narrowed, then it's important to take a break. And so there's this popular saying that you never go to bed mad, but that's completely ridiculous. It does not work. It doesn't mean that you go to bed in separate rooms despising each other and mad at each other. It means that you call a truce and you pause and you just say, we're going to revisit this. So if you're needing to pause a fight because both of you are too reactive, or maybe one of you is too reactive, say, I need to take a break. Don't say, you need to take a break. That's blaming, and that's going to get into another circular fight. You say, I need to take a break. And you really need to take a break for 30 minutes minimum. That's going to help you reduce the tension, and 24 hours maximum. So I'll have a couple who are both more avoidant. So they'll leave an argument and they'll just never want to get back into it, so they don't end up solving the actual root of the problem. So you want to be able to say, tomorrow we're going to discuss this, and really stick to it. Because usually if a problem is coming up, there's a real matter at heart. And when we're able to really discuss it, figure it out, then that's what over time builds the commitment, the trust, and the ability to know that my feelings are safe in this relationship. Another note when you take a break is that when you take a break, you're not just thinking about the fight. You're not just thinking about your rebuttal, because if you are, you're going to be kind of lost in your ego, and you're actually going to stay in that dysregulated state. So do something, get your mind and attention off of it as best as you can, and then you'll have a fresh pair of eyes and perspective and a calmed down nervous system, so you can meet your partner with this grounded energy and really get to the heart of the matter. The third tip when it comes to navigating conflict in relationships is to embrace the impasse. So often we are so attached to trying to figure out the particular solution that we keep fighting round and round, and that there's not really a solution inherent in the conversation. Research shows that 69% of all conflicts have no resolution, that they're not actually solvable, and instead they're perpetual. And that there's never going to be that one aha moment where you say, okay, this is never something we have to talk about again. You know, an example of a perpetual issue is if you have one partner who's cleaner than the other partner. It's not likely they're going to change the partner to really care as much about cleaning as the first, but it's about trying to understand and accept the differences. So if there's a problem coming up in your relationship and it's not really hurting your soul, it's not taking away the things that you really need to be your best self, it's not the highest level of value for you, then sometimes we have to ask ourselves if it's worth fighting for. So for example, my husband loves to leave bags on the kitchen counter. It bothers me always. And I never come in. When I see it, I'm like, he did it again. And it's something that I have tried to change in him over the years. Now I realize, okay, it takes me a lot less energy to just put the cups in the bag away rather than fight him on it. And instead of trying to change him and make him care as much as I do about clean counters, it's been easier on me ultimately. And now when I see that bag, I kind of have to laugh because I'm just realizing like, this is him, and at least he brought the bag in from the car. You know, you try to figure out the appreciation and the gratitude in it, because we find people who are different than us. If someone was exactly the same as us, we would not grow and we would probably get bored. And so we need that sort of friction. And so if it's something that you're arguing over that you really don't care about, then appreciate the difference and appreciate that you might not find, you know, the peace and the aha moment or the revelation that allows you to feel like it's not a problem that you'll ever have to come to again. When it comes to these perpetual problems, the goal is not to solve, it's to understand. And so if it's something, you know, the grocery bag on the counter is somewhat benign and laughable, but say a perpetual problem is how much time you spend with extended family. Now, this might be more connected to like a deep virtue and value that you have, something that is really, really important to you and maybe not to your partner. So in cases of that, you still have to appreciate that you're coming from different perspectives, different value systems, and you don't need it to all be compatible. But it's about seeking some understanding. And to understand means we have to be more curious and ask questions. So if there's something really important to you and you feel like it's not about problem solving, ask more questions about where your partner's coming from. Why isn't family that important to them? What happened in their childhood? Is it connected to something else? And through that process, you'll be able to come to terms with this difference. On the same note, we have to be able to learn to compromise. So when it comes to compromise, both partners have to give a little. And an exercise to help you find compromise is if you have the thing that you're fighting about and there's not that solution that's really easy to find, then you seek to understand where your limits of compromise are. So what's your inflexible areas? What are you flexible on? And you have your partner do the same, where you see where is that overlap and where can we find a way forward that's appreciating both of our perspectives, but also not sacrificing completely the other person's position. The fourth tip to navigating conflict is being really good at repair. So when we fight with someone, we're not always showing up as our best. Ideally, we're able to apply the 3 tips that I just went over, but it doesn't always happen. And sometimes we do something regrettable. Maybe we call them names, maybe we slam a door, maybe we just do something that's not of our higher self. And being able to give ourselves grace and accept that this is going to happen gives a lot of freedom, as long as you decide and be really good at a repair. And so a repair can look different ways. It could look like just physical touch, saying that you love them, saying that you're sorry, you acknowledge that you hurt their feelings. It could be some level of intimacy, whether it's just going over what you were feeling during that fight. It's some sort of acknowledgement for what just occurred. And so it doesn't matter if you get into a huge argument. Almost every couple I've worked with, there's been times where people literally have broken phones and slammed my office door. When we're passionate, when we love someone, when we care deeply, we're more likely to get fiery. And that's okay as long as we're aware of how important the repair is. This is the same for all relationships, intimate and otherwise. So if you're watching and you have kids, you've likely been pushed to the edge of mental collapse at some point where you're so frustrated and you say or do something, or you've just reached a point where you're just not your best self. And research shows it's not the parents who are perfect, who aren't reacting, that help children develop really psychologically healthy. It's more the parents who are able to come to the child and say, I did something wrong. I'm sorry I hurt you. I'm going to do this better next time. Because what that teaches a child and what that teaches anyone that we come into contact with is we are all in the process of growing and evolving and shifting, and that none of us are perfect, that we make mistakes. And it's not whether you make a mistake in a relationship or you blow up with your partner. It's about being able to be humble, accept responsibility, and be able to convey true empathy and acknowledge and promise how you're going to be better the next time.